Hello everyone. So this is our lecture 2, class 9th, subject English. In my previous lecture I discussed the explanation of this chapter, that is the snake and the mirror. And this is the continuation of this chapter only. This is our lecture 2. In this lecture we will discuss the new words, the chapter highlights. In this lecture, we will have a recapitulation, that means a brief review of the chapter which we have discussed in my previous lecture. Then we will discuss the chapter highlights. Then we will also revise poem 6, that is No Men Are Foreign. And then we will discuss the homework solutions related to this chapter. Start with the recapitulation. This is the story about a snake. It had entered into the narrator's room. The narrator, who is a homeopathic doctor, who is actually practicing for his doctorship. He had just started his practice those days. So he was in his practice days, and he used to live in a small apartment that was all dirty, shabby, without roof, no light connection, nothing. Doctor sees his face in the mirror. Then what happened one day when he had returned after a dinner in a restaurant, he sat in front of a mirror, and it was a hot summer night. The doctor had his meals at the restaurant and returned home. I told you he had returned home after having his dinner at the restaurant. Then he returned to his apartment that was actually rented one. The rented house was not electrified. There was no electricity connection. So he lighted the kerosene lamp. Then he took off his coat and shirt and opened the two windows. To have some fresh air, he opened the two windows as it was a hot summer night. Then after some time he settled on the chair and took out a book. Then he sat on one chair and took out one book that was actually related to his medical practice. So initially he thought to read something about it, but then he saw a large mirror on the table, and those days the doctor bothered much about his looks. So when he saw a mirror placed in front of him on a table, he was lost in his world of imagination, and the book which he had opened to read actually was left there only. Suddenly there was a dull thud. As he turned his head, a fat snake landed over his shoulder. So what happened when he was lost in his world of imagination of improving his own looks? There was a dull thud, as if something heavy had fallen. As he turned his head to look around at what was actually there, a fat snake landed over his shoulder. Before the doctor could think of anything, the snake had coiled around his left arm above the elbow, and the snake started coiling itself around the narrator's left arm above the shoulder. His hood was spread out. His head was hardly 3 or 4 inches apart from his face. So one can imagine the condition of the narrator, that how he was actually sitting that time when a heavy snake had coiled itself around its one arm. His one arm that was actually heavy, his hand was also paining, and also he could not move, because if he would move then definitely the snake would have bit him. The doctor sat there as if he were a piece of stone. So the doctor stood there as if he was a piece of stone that he could not move. He thought of only one help. Now in such a situation, who could only help one? Only God. It seemed God appreciated that. The snake turned its head and looked into the mirror. Then, as soon as he prayed to God to help him, he thought he saw that the snake had turned its head from the narrator and started looking into the mirror. The snake then unwound itself from the doctor's arm. That means the snake slowly started coiling or moving down from the doctor's arm to the mirror, to the table. He fell into his lap, and after moving down from his hand, initially the snake fell into the lap of the doctor, and from his lap it started coiling above the table. From there it crept on the table. From there it crawled on the table on which the mirror was placed. Then it moved towards the mirror. Apparently it wanted to see its reflection more closely. As the snake had seen its own reflection in the mirror, so it might be possible that the snake wanted to see its reflection more closely. This was the doctor's opportunity, and when the snake was lost in seeing its own reflection in the mirror, that was the golden opportunity for the narrator to run from there. Very slowly he got up from the chair. Initially he was sitting like a stone. Then suddenly he got alive and he got up, and very slowly he started getting up from the chair. He ran out of the house in no moments. Obviously he could not stay there for long, so he just ran out of the house in no moments without wasting any time. He reached a friend's house, and when he started running, he reached his friend's house and spent his time there. He came back to his house only next morning. So, he reached his friend's house and came back to collect his material from the apartment. It was about 8:30 when he reached at his apartment. It was about 8:30 in the morning. He had with him his friend, and he did not come alone. He did not come alone there. He had his friend with him and one or two or others. They had to move his things from there. They actually came to shift his things from there. However, they had little to carry. Though there was little amount, or we can say there were less items to carry, as the author or the narrator did not carry many items with him. Some thief had taken away most of the things, and there was a robbery that had taken place in his apartment. There was no sign of the snake also, and there was no sign, there was no reflection, no image, nothing of the snake. And there was a thief who had taken almost everything. Also there were very less items, and the thief had also taken that also. Now let's see the chapter highlights. A poor homeopathy doctor is the narrator of the story, right? He is narrating the story to his listeners, that what had actually happened with him one day, one night. He lived in a house where there was no electricity and was full of rats. He told his listeners that he used to live in a house in which there was no electricity connection, and the house, the room, the apartment was full of rats and other reptiles. On a summer night, he returned home late. On one summer night, after taking his dinner at a restaurant, he returned to his apartment late night. Feeling suffocated, he opened windows. So, as it was a hot summer night and there was no electricity connection, to have some fresh air, he opened the windows. Then He lit up a kerosene lamp and sat on a chair in front of a large mirror and took out a medical book to study. Then what happened? As there was no electricity, he lit up a kerosene lamp and he was not feeling sleepy as there was no electricity, no air was coming from window also. So he just sat on a chair and took out a medical book to study. He could not concentrate as the weather was hot. As there was so much heat, he could not concentrate on the studies, and there was a mirror placed in front of him on a table. While looking at the mirror, then he started looking himself in the mirror, and instead of concentrating on his book, he was lost in his own thoughts, in his own world of imagination. While looking at the mirror, he made two plans. He even decided two things to do further. To look more handsome, he will shave daily, and to look more and more handsome, he would keep a smile on his face, as he thought that he was a bachelor and everyone should know that he was available. Secondly, he plans to marry a fat lady doctor with plenty of money. Second thing which he planned after his looks was to marry a fat lady doctor so that she could not run after him if he would do anything wrong. So such silly thoughts and imaginations were coming one after the other in his mind. As there was so much heat, he could not concentrate on his studies, and so there were a list of imaginations that were running up and down in his mind. Suddenly there was a sound of thud and the rat stopped making noises. Initially he heard the noise and he thought that the noise was quite a familiar one, so it would be the sound of rats. But then suddenly it was a sound of thud. Thud means as if something heavy had fallen. The doctor turned back to see what had happened, and suddenly that distracted his imagination, his thoughts, and made him turn back to see what had actually fallen. He found a snake landed on his shoulder. Then he found that a heavy and a long snake had landed on his left arm. Before he could do anything, the venomous creature, venomous Zehreela, right? The venomous creature had coiled itself around his left arm. The poisonous creature, right? The poisonous creature had coiled itself around the left arm of the narrator, and he could not think what to do next. The doctor tried his best to hold his breath and become like stone, as he knew even a slight movement may kill him. So, the doctor tried his best not to move a bit, tried to hold his breath, and he was sitting like a stone. Like stone did not do any movement. Similarly, he was sitting like a stone, as he knew that if he would move even a bit, that may kill him. The doctor was praying for the Almighty for the God's blessings to get rid of the situation. Then, in such a situation, he started praying to God to help him to get rid out of that situation. It appeared to him that his left arm was getting crushed under the pressure of the venomous snake, as the snake was quite heavy and his shoulder could not bear the weight of the venomous snake, and also he could not move. So his left arm was getting crushed, was in pain, was in deep pain, and he could not do anything, but he had to bear the pressure, and also he had to hold his breath in order to let the snake move out of his arm silently. His mental and physical strength was drained off. So, in such a situation, his physical strength, and mentally he was just drained off. He could not think anything except praying to God to get out of this situation. He labelled himself as a stupid fellow. Why? Because he did not carry any medicine for snake bite in his medical kit, though he himself was a doctor, and he smiled himself thinking about the situation, that what would happen if the snake would bite him, and also he would not be having any kind of ointment or medicine to apply. While sitting breathless like a stone and thinking of his own consequences, the doctor saw suddenly the snake turned its head towards the mirror. Then the doctor saw that suddenly the snake started coiling itself out of its arm. Then it coiled itself from the doctor's arm and crept on the table and crawled on the table on which the mirror was placed. It moved towards the mirror. It started moving towards the mirror on the table on which the mirror was placed. As the snake uncoiled itself from the doctor's left arm and slowly moved towards the mirror, he felt it's the perfect time to escape. As the snake had coiled itself on the table from the doctor's arm, that was a golden chance for him to run out of that situation. He came out of the room and vanished into the darkness of the night. He just get up from the chair slowly and ran out of the room within no time and vanished into the darkness of the night. He ran like anything and vanished into the darkness of the night without even turning back once. He did not stop running until he reached his friend's house. He did not stop running until he reached some safe place, that was his friend's house. Reaching there, he had a bath, applied oil all over the body, and was dressed up in a fresh cloth. On the next morning, he came back to the house to collect his belongings and to leave the house forever. So he decided to leave that apartment forever, as it could be dangerous for him to live there. So the next morning around 8:30 in the morning, he came back with his friend to collect his things. He found the thieves had stolen everything except his dirty waist. So he found that his apartment had been stolen by someone. That means a robbery had taken place and everything was taken away by the thieves except his dirty vest. The doctor told his friends that it is true that he was severely frightened when the snake fell on him, and it was an impromptu incident. That means that in that situation, that was an unforgettable moment, unforgettable thing, unforgettable time for the narrator, as it was really a frightened thing that had happened with him. What the thief did was no doubt an insult to him. So, in a humorous way, in the end he quoted that what the thief did, that he carried everything except his dirty waist. That was a kind of insult to the narrator. The thief had taken away all his belongings. Then why did he leave his dirty vest for him? It seems that the thieves proved him to be an unclean and untidy fellow, and for the doctor it was very hard to digest such an insult by a thief. Okay, now let's discuss the new words of this chapter. Mere, small in quantity, possessed, had, solitary, single. Yard. Yard means an open area like a garden or veranda. Gable, upper part of a wall below a sloping roof. Bachelor, a man who is not and has never been married. Earth-shaking decision, something very important. On top of it, to add on to something. Paced, walked. Valid, logical. Wriggled, crawled. Simultaneous, happened at the same time. Slithered, twisting and crawling motion of the snake. Hood, head of the snake. Strike, attack. Lurked, hid. Feebly means weakly. Vermilion spot, that is a red bindi. Closer quarters, to get a closer look. Granite, form of a marble. Smeared, covered with. Rascal, a mischievous or cheeky person. Taken with, attracted by. Let's discuss this poem, No Men Are Foreign by Ch-5. This poem covers various points of similarity between people from all countries. It reminds us that we are all the same, for we are all humans related to each other, despite differences in race, geography or language. Despite our differences in language, culture, clothes, we all are same. Hating other people because they are different or raising arms against each other only show our narrow-mindedness. We must consider the entire world as a big family where no one is stranger. So the poet is laying stress that we should consider this entire world as our family and no one is strange or no one is different from us. This poem tells that all people are essentially the same. We should not see other people as foreign or strange just because they come from some other country or place. Humanity is the same all over the earth. All divisions based on nation, caste, creed, color, religion or language are baseless, since we all have the same basic needs and to fulfill them we depend on the same resources available on the earth. So, we should not create differences on the grounds of anything. People everywhere have the same physical, mental and emotional experiences. People all over the world goes through the same problems physically, mentally and emotionally. They are in no way different or strange, even though they wear different clothes, speak different languages and profess different religions. That means on the basis of clothes or language or religion, the people of different countries are no way different. If we harm anyone, we are harming ourselves, because we all are related to each other with the same thread of humanity. We must keep in mind that if we destroy another country, we are destroying our own earth. Since we are all same, we must not take arms against anyone, because we only defile, that means we only cheat our earth by such actions. The dust and smoke caused by war weapons pollute the very air we breathe in, the air which is common everywhere and which is common to all. So, all violence of all kinds should be stopped. It will lead us to a better life. Thus, the poet urges us that we should live in peace and harmony and do works for spreading fraternity all around us. Now let's discuss the homework solutions related to the questions of chapter number 5, the snake and mirror. The first question states, the sound was a familiar one. What sound did the doctor hear? What did he think it was? How many times did he hear it? And when and why did the sound stop? The sound that the doctor heard was that of rats, which moved on the beam overhead. He thought that it was the squeaking of the rats. He heard the sound thrice. The places in the text which indicate this are as follows. I heard a noise from above as I opened the door. So this was a quote from the chapter. Again I heard that sound from above. Again came that noise from above. So there are such lines repeated in the chapter. When the doctor sat on the chair, the sound stopped suddenly as the rats had seen a snake. Next question. What two important and earth-shaking decisions did the doctor take while he was looking into the mirror? Answer. When the doctor looked at himself in the mirror, he decided to improve his looks in order to appear more handsome. So, he made two important and earth-shaking decisions. Firstly, he would shave daily and grow a thin moustache. Secondly, he would always keep smiling as he looked attractive when he smiled. Third, I looked into the mirror and smiled, says the doctor. A little later he says, I forgot my danger and smiled feebly at myself. What is the doctor's opinion about himself in these two categories? Answer. When the doctor smiled for the first time, he thought that he was a valuable man as he was an unmarried doctor and there would be many girls who wanted to marry him. He was looking at himself in the mirror, admiring himself and planning to improve his looks. Second, when he smiled for the second time, he was helpless and thought that he was a foolish person. He was looking at himself in the mirror, feeling that he was so silly to have landed into trouble as he could not think of any way out. Now your homework is that you have to read and revise chapter number 5, The Snake and the Mirror, and poem 6, No Men Are Foreign thoroughly. Complete your question answers of the chapter as well as of the poem in your fair notebook.